What if the lessons your child is being taught were never meant to educate but to engineer? Is this curriculum by committee or control? For generations, parents assumed that curriculum was a local decision. Elected school boards, parent-teacher input, community values reflected in every page. But that era is gone. Today, what your child learns is often determined by national nonprofits, political think tanks, and corporations, many of which operate behind closed doors, beyond your vote, and without your consent. Organizations like Achieve Inc., College Board, and even the Council of Chief State School Officers have enormous sway over what's included in school curriculum. Who elected them? No one. And yet, they're the ones designing the frameworks your child's teacher must follow, from first grade math to 12th grade civics. The federal government may not write the textbooks, but it funds the people who do. Thanks to legislation like ESSA, state education departments are pressured into adopting research-based or standards-aligned curriculum. But in reality, these terms are code for centralized control. Because if a curriculum doesn't meet the standards pushed by federal consultants and testing companies, it doesn't get funding, it doesn't get approval. And your local school district is left with a choice: comply or collapse. This isn't academic freedom, it's educational blackmail. And it gets worse. Many of these curriculum advisors have open political affiliations and agendas, from pushing globalist frameworks to embedding subtle ideological language into everyday lessons. These aren't just textbooks, they're tools of transformation. Transformation not chosen by families, but by bureaucrats and billionaires. So the next time you hear about updated standards or revised curriculum, ask this: updated by who? For whose benefit? And what are they trying to erase or implant in your child's mind? Think your child's textbook was written by a team of impartial educators and vetted by experts? Think again. In today's education system, textbooks aren't just teaching tools, they're battlegrounds. And the ones controlling them? Major publishing corporations with global reach and political influence. Pearson, McGraw-Hill, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. These giants don't just print books, they print ideologies. They control which historical figures are emphasized and which are erased. They shape how capitalism, socialism, gender, race, and even American history are framed. One change to a sentence, one image swapped out, one concept left unexplained, and the meaning of an entire lesson shifts. And these changes don't happen in a vacuum. In 2014, Pearson was forced to admit its close ties to testing companies and digital platforms it also owned, raising some pretty serious ethical questions about conflict of interest. If you create the test, sell the textbook, and own the grading software, how neutral are you, really? These companies also rely on contracts with states, often worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So, when a particular political movement or cultural narrative dominates public discourse, publishers adjust their content accordingly, not based on truth, but on marketability. And guess what? They aren't adjusting to your values. They're adjusting to California, to New York, to Washington, D.C., because those are the biggest buyers, and honestly, the squeakiest wheels. That means your small-town school in Nebraska, Tennessee, or Oklahoma is using books rewritten for the politics of San Francisco. This isn't just a supply chain of paper, it's a pipeline of ideology. So the next time your child brings home a history or science book, don't just read what's inside. Ask yourself, what's missing and why? Standardized testing. The phrase alone conjures images of scantrons, bubble sheets, and endless hours of prep. But what if these tests weren't about assessing knowledge? What if they were about enforcing compliance? Under federal mandates like ESSA, testing has morphed from a tool into a weapon. Every year, millions of students are funneled through standardized exams designed by private corporations. And every wrong answer, every pause, every keystroke is logged, analyzed, and stored. Who's behind the curtain? Companies like Pearson, College Board, and Smarter Balanced don't just profit from test fees. They shape what's taught by controlling what's tested. If it's on the test, it's in the curriculum. If it's not, it disappears. But here's where it gets darker. These aren't just math and reading exams anymore. Increasingly, standardized assessments include social-emotional learning, or SEL, components, gauging attitudes, values, and psychological tendencies. Questions like, do you feel safe in your community? Or how do you define fairness? Might sound harmless, until you realize this data feeds into student profiles that follow kids for life. And those profiles? They can be used to predict success, determine interventions, and even influence school funding. This isn't education, it's predictive programming. And it doesn't stop with students. Teachers are evaluated based on how their students perform on these tests, pressuring them to teach to the test rather than inspire real learning. The entire system becomes a loop test: score, adjust curriculum, retest. Critical thinking, creativity, debate. There's no room for that on a Scantron. We're no longer raising thinkers, we're programming test takers. In the past, classrooms belonged to teachers. They curated the lessons, they knew the students, they built the learning environment from scratch. But today, classrooms are rented space, owned by corporations. The chalkboard has been replaced by smartboards, the textbook by an app, the teacher's authority replaced by an algorithm. Who runs the show? Google, Microsoft, Apple, Pearson. These aren't education companies, they're tech and testing titans with multi-billion-dollar stakes in how and what your child learns. Google Classroom has become the default learning platform in tens of thousands of schools. Sounds efficient, until you realize that every interaction, every submission, every email becomes data. Microsoft Teams for Education, same thing. It's not just a collaboration tool, it's a pipeline to student behavior, patterns, and habits. Even the free resources like Khan Academy or Edmodo come with cost, your child's privacy. Then there's Panorama Education, a data analytics firm backed by powerful investors, yes, including Mark Zuckerberg, that collects social-emotional data from surveys, assessments, and behavior tracking. Schools are no longer focused on teaching facts. They're focused on shaping feelings, attitudes, and behaviors, using tech designed not to educate, but to influence. And let's not forget, every one of these tools was introduced under the banner of equity, access, and personalization. But underneath, it's about control. Control the platform leads to control the content, which leads to control the outcome. Parents think school is a place of learning, but your child isn't just being taught, they're being tracked, analyzed, and shaped by tech overlords who never stepped foot in a classroom. This isn't education reform. It's a digital colonization, and unless we take back the classroom, we're just raising compliant users, not independent thinkers. Forget lesson plans, forget teachers making day-by-day decisions in real time based on what their students need. Because in today's classroom, the algorithm decides. And it doesn't care about nuance. Personalized learning is the buzzword. It sounds empowering. Tailored lessons, adaptive systems, optimized outcomes. But here's the catch. Who's programming the algorithm? It's not teachers. It's not local school boards. It's not even your elected officials. It's private tech firms with proprietary code, undisclosed biases, and financial interests. They decide what lessons your child sees, what pace they move at, what information is prioritized, and what's left out. Algorithms don't teach kids to think. They teach kids to follow. And they reward the behaviors they're programmed to value: speed over depth, compliance over curiosity, predictability over problem solving. And here's the most chilling part. These platforms adapt, not to what's educationally sound, but to what's most engaging. In other words, the same feedback loops that make TikTok addictive are now embedded in your child's learning system. Learning becomes gamified, education becomes entertainment, and critical thinking gets buried under dopamine-driven progress bars. Meanwhile, teachers become little more than proctors, overseeing tech-facilitated learning instead of guiding it. And if the algorithm decides a student is, falling behind, remediation kicks in automatically, often reinforcing the very system that failed them in the first place. This is not education. It's behavioral conditioning, wrapped in the language of innovation. The future of schooling, unless we intervene, won't be shaped by people. It will be shaped by code. What happens when education stops being about building citizens and starts being about creating consumers? Because that's exactly where we are. The modern education system isn't just failing to teach kids how to think, it's training them to obey, click, consume, and conform. Think about it. Algorithms tell them what to learn, devices tell them when to learn, apps reward them for the right answers and penalize them for hesitation. It's not a classroom anymore. It's a training ground for brand loyalty and behavioral predictability. Behind every lesson plan, there's a hidden curriculum. Be passive, be trackable, be a product. Corporate-funded edtech platforms, they condition kids to interact with the world just like they do with their devices. Swipe for validation, accept updates without question, trust the system over personal insight. And the result? Well, it's a generation raised not to challenge authority, but to depend on it. They honestly don't know how to navigate life without an algorithm guiding them. They don't seek truth, they seek confirmation. And they don't develop identity, they download it. Meanwhile, all the data they generate, it just feeds right back into the very corporations shaping the system. Behavior profiles are sold to advertisers, learning habits are mined by predictive AI, and emotional responses are tracked by so-called engagement analytics. But it's not enough to just sell to this generation. Big tech is really engineering the ideal consumer. A student who doesn't think critically is an adult who doesn't question authority. And a society full of those adults? That's a market paradise for those in power, and honestly a nightmare for freedom. This isn't education reform, it's economic engineering. They've hijacked the classroom, rewired the curriculum, infiltrated the media, and rewritten the rules. But here's what they didn't count on. You. Parents, teachers, students, citizens, people who still believe in truth, in critical thinking, in freedom. Because once you see the system for what it is, you can't unsee it. And once you recognize the game, you stop playing by their rules. This isn't about politics. It's not left versus right. It's top versus bottom, control versus consciousness. The system wants obedience. But what this country was built on was resistance. So what do we do now? We stop outsourcing education to billionaires. We pull our kids out of broken schools and into community-based alternatives. We stop letting tech corporations parent our children through screens. We get loud, we get local, we get organized. Start a homeschool co-op, run for school board, question the experts, unplug from the narrative. Because the greatest threat to tyranny is a generation that knows how to think. This series isn't just a warning, it's a wake-up call. And this is your moment to choose: complacency or courage, comfort or confrontation, normal or unnormal. Let's build something better together.